and welcome to my channel. My name is Angelina and today I'm going to be doing my February wrap-up. And in February I managed to read 12 books, and I am going to go through like some stats and stuff first, so I will have timestamps down in the description below if you want to skip the stats and go straight to the books. But as for my stats, 6 of the books that I read, so half of the books, were by BIPOC authors, and 3 were by openly queer authors. One of the books was a reread, and then I had 2 DNFs, but I will not be discussing those in this video because I like to do a little wrap up of all of my DNFs all in one video, so you can look forward to that video coming sometime. And then I read 2,868 pages. As for the genres, I read 1 contemporary, 3 horror, 4 nonfiction, and 4 sci-fi. For the format of books that I read, 3 of them were audiobooks, 4 were ebooks, and then 5 were physical books. And then 9 books were targeted at an adult audience and 3 were targeted at a YA audience. And my rating for this month was actually on the high end, which was amazing. I had 3 3 stars, 2 3.5 stars, 3 4 stars, and 4 5 stars, which is the most 5 stars I've ever had in quite a few years now, so that was really nice. And then for like the type of books, I read 4 novels, I read 1 poetry collection, 2 novellas, and then 3 mangas. As for the author status, 1 was by a debut author, 4 were by authors who were new to me, and then 7 were by authors I have read from before. So now let's get into the books. I'm going to be talking about these books from lowest rated to highest rated, just because I just like leaving the video off on a more positive note. So let's get into it. Alright, so I gave 3 stars to volumes 7, 8, and 9 of Kaiju number 8. And so I'm all lumping them all as one just because I don't really have too much thoughts on like the singular volumes for the series. I do feel like as the series is continuing, my enjoyment of it is slightly going down. Like, they're still fun books, but I'm not enjoying them the same way I was at the beginning of the series, which is very sad. But if you don't know, this is a manga sci-fi dystopian type series following our main character who wants to be part of this kaiju force, where they're like a military force that hunts down kaiju who just appear around the cities, and he keeps failing his test, and then one day he ends up becoming a kaiju, and it's about that. And it's a really fun, action-packed series, and I do hope that they do start like picking up again, just because I feel like these 3 volumes, while I didn't read them back to back, I did read like a book, like a full-length book in between each one. I do feel like they were all the same. I feel like nothing really happened to make each volume stand out from one another, and I feel like this is just like a really big lagging place in the series, but it's fine. Alright, next I read Unwell Women by Eleanor Cleghorn, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. And this is a non-fiction book all about the myths and misdiagnosis in a man-made world. And as for like a non-fiction book, while like the topic was really interesting and one that I was very into, I feel like the writing style of it is not my favorite. In it, there's like a lot of stories that are getting told and not like enough of like the author's like own input, own research, not enough like factual stuff, I guess. I felt like I was just reading like story after story about like examples of what the author was talking about, which is fine. I just personally feel like there's a little too much of that, and it was kind of like bogging the story down. But it was a very interesting read. I am very glad that I read it. However, it is not my favorite book that I've ever read. Yeah. And then I read Daddy by Victor LaValle, and I also gave this one 3.5 stars. And this is a short horror story. I read it all in like one little car trip going to work, but honestly, It was pretty fascinating. I'm really glad that I listened to the audiobook for it. I can't really like say too much about it because it is such a short book, but it's following this guy and his kid, and they're at their house, things happen. It's got like some interesting themes to it that it's exploring that I don't want to get into because I guess they're kind of a spoiler if I talked about them, but it was a pretty solid book that I'm glad to have read. And then I read Cultish by Amanda Montell. I gave this one 4 stars. This is another nonfiction, and this one is all about cults, all about the word cult, all about like how we use the word cult in our society now versus when the word first came about. It talks about different cults. It's very interesting, very fascinating. I really enjoyed it. This is another one I listened to the audiobook for, and I would highly recommend listening to the audiobook. But this was just like a really fascinating read. So yeah, I really like that one, would really recommend it. Next I read Sometimes I Trip on How Happy We Could Be by Nicole Perkins, and this is a book of essays, and it's all essays concerning like this author's life, and this one was really fascinating. I did give it 4 stars. I did individually rate each essay in here, which I personally really like doing in books like this. I did tab a lot, like any quotes that I really liked and everything, but this was just like a really solid nonfiction book, essay collection, all that. Yeah, I also didn't know too much about this book going into it. It is one that my boyfriend had picked out for me when we were at the bookstore together, and yeah, this was just like a really nice surprise. I really enjoyed it. I found it fascinating, and I feel like I need to read more essay collections just because of how interesting they are to me, and also they're short and I can easily break them up into little, like, sit down, read one a day or whatever, and yeah, I really like that. I really like this book. I also love this cover. I don't know, the colors are just so pretty to me, but I would highly recommend checking this one out. It's really concerning like beauty standards and just like how the media like centers beauty standards, and it talks a lot about sex and relationships. All of that is in here, and I loved it. It was really good. 4 stars. Next is What Feast at Night by T. Kingfisher. This is book 2. The first one is What Moves the Dead, but this is a short little horror novella, and I will say I did give this one 4 stars. It was a bit disappointing compared to the first one because the first book is one of my all-time favorite books. So of course this one was one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and it was really good. I really did love it, just not as much as the first one. And because when I finished the first one, I didn't even know that it was going to be a series. I'm not sure if it was really intended to be a series. I honestly don't think it needed to be a series, but you know, we do have this book. It is following the same characters, which I really loved. Yeah, it was just really great getting to follow these characters again. It is a horror book, however, I would not say the horror is up to the same like standards as the first one, I guess. Like, it's a very different type of horror, I suppose you could say. But yeah, this one definitely has like the spooky tension to it. Just, it didn't grip me the same way that the first book did, which was disappointing, but again, I still really enjoyed it. Next is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. In that same vein, we're moving into my 5 stars. I reread this, it was 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. It was my 3rd time rereading this book, and I still think it is one of my favorite horror books of all time. Yeah, also it was really fun because when I first reread this book, I did annotate and tab it, and this is actually technically like my first reread I've done for a book that I annotated before, so it was just really nice getting to like see what I found important and like what notes I made about it. It was just a really fun experience, but I love this book. it is following our main character Alex, who is going to their friend's manor after receiving a letter that their friend had fallen ill. It is based on The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. I haven't read that, so I can't really make a comparison on if this is a good retelling or not, but I love this book. It's super creepy. Yes, one of my all-time favorites. Would highly recommend. Again, it did get a 5-star for the 3rd time now, if that says anything. Alright, the next book I gave 5 stars was Reflections on Healing by Rachel Oates. This is a poetry and photography collection. It's very short, but I'm also wearing this author's merch. She is a YouTuber by the channel Rachel Oates, who is a channel that I absolutely love watching. So yeah, I obviously got this book because I was interested to see what her poetry and her photography was like, and I did give it 5 stars. However, my favorite poem was Puppet Master. So yeah, that was my favorite. It is definitely one that has stuck with me. But this is, again, it's, as the title says, it's Reflections on Healing. This deals a lot with abusive relationships, difficult family relationships, and just mental health, things like that. A lot of trigger warnings going into this one, but I thought it was absolutely amazing. Again, I am a fan of the YouTube channel that this author runs, so if you want to say that skews, my view of this book, then take my review as a grain of salt, but I really liked it, and I'm not really into poetry, so how much this one really resonated with me and stuff, I kind of found shocking, but I love this one, so I would highly recommend it. And then I gave 5 stars to Black AF History by Michael Harriot. This is a nonfiction book all about Black history in America, and I listened to the audiobook of this one, and I would really recommend because I think it is a fantastic audiobook. I just found it amazing. One of probably the best audiobook I've ever listened to, honestly, just because the narrator really infused a lot of emphasis onto things, and I really like that. But again, this is a nonfiction book, and I just really liked the writing style of this book and how it's set up. So not only are you getting personal stories of the author, as well as a history lesson, but at the end of the chapter there's some humorous quizzes and activities, and I think that really made the book I like a good humorous moment in a more serious book. So even though this was dealing with heavier topics, it is a nonfiction book, it's more serious, I do like that the author made it a bit lighthearted in some moments, and that sort of made the entire experience. This was a really fun book. Definitely wish that some of the topics that came up in this book were actually taught in school. Unfortunately, they are not, but it was nice getting to learn about them through this book. So again, 5 stars. Definitely a nonfiction book I would highly, highly recommend you check out. Alright, and the last book I have to talk to you guys about, and my last 5-star read of February, is Children of Memory by Adrian Tichabosky. So this is book 3 in this series, Children of Time series. I'm not really sure what the series itself is called. It might just be called Children of Time, but it is a sci-fi book, and what it's about. I can't really tell you what this book in particular is about, really, except that we're on a new planet, we've got something new going on. This one itself had more of a mystery element, which was kind of cool, but I guess the first book in the series is taking place after Earth sort of is dying out, everyone is leaving Earth, and there's a lot of different, spaceships going everywhere, and we're sort of following this one failed attempt at a planet, I suppose, in which they were trying to terraform it and get it ready for humans, and they tried to like program this, I'm not really sure what it was, but they're like trying to program like evolution to like speed up, and it sort of fails. So instead of like infecting like chimps and stuff to evolve into humans, it actually ends up going into spiders and makes these like superhuman spider type creatures. They're like really big spiders that can talk. We are following their point of view along with like different humans' point of view. It's just like a really fascinating book. And this one, again, it's the third book in the series, but we're sort of following some of the characters from books 1 and 2 and putting them into like this new planet area that they're exploring. I don't know, I can't really say too much. It is a very like convoluted, very like philosophical type of sci-fi, which I know is not everyone's thing. I know that's like a big complaint of the first book, is that it's very philosophical. But I personally absolutely love that. I loved this book. I was kind of taken aback by like the whole mystery aspect of this book, but I think that like made it so much better. Like I didn't know I needed a mystery in it, but this one was really good, really fascinating. Again, one that just really makes you think, and I really like that in my sci-fi. I like something that makes me think way too hard. Yeah, I don't know, but it was great. 5 stars. So those are all 12 books that I read in February. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite book that you read in February was, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!